2021 is a momentous year for many gaming franchises. Some of the most influential and popular video game series of all time just so happen to be facing their major anniversaries this year. With that in mind, now seems good a time as any to look back at these famous gaming franchises, recounting my own personal experiences with them, and celebrating their history. Welcome to a new series on this channel. Welcome to Gaming Anniversaries. In 1991, 2 years into the lifespan of Sega's new console, the Mega Drive, or the Genesis if you live in America, Sega's graphical powerhouse was making inroads into the market. However, Nintendo had a successor to their hugely successful Nintendo Entertainment System. The SNES was coming out, and Super Mario World was in danger of making Sega irrelevant. Mario was the most popular IP in all of gaming. In order to compete with Mario, Sega needed a franchise that would be just as recognisable as Mario. Alex Kidd wasn't really doing it for them. They needed a killer app for the Mega Drive, one with huge brand mainstream appeal, just like Mario. After commissioning several artists to design different characters, Sega eventually settled on a Hedgehog as the design of choice. A blue hedgehog with a distinctive round body and spikes. Like both Mario and Mickey Mouse, he was to wear white gloves. They christened their new creation Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog was a huge success, the game being sold based on pure speed and adrenaline, and ensured Nintendo weren't going to dominate the market like they did with the NES. Sega would provide Nintendo with genuine competition, and Sonic was front and centre of this. Sonic was the first gaming character since Mario to transcend gaming, and Sega took every opportunity to make Sonic's presence known worldwide, especially after the launch of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, one of the all-time classic games in gaming history. Sonic got TV shows and even sponsored an entire Formula 1 race in 1993. Sega had a mega star on their hands, and for a few years Sonic was a real genuine contender alongside Mario. However, these days, while Sonic is known as a gaming icon and among the top 3 selling video game franchises in the world, the actual games themselves have been very divisive, with Sonic having starred in everything from some of the very best games to some of the worst games of all time. It has gotten to the point that whenever a new Sonic game comes out, it's something of a lottery whether the game is good enough. Sonic has divided many and become the Marmite of video games. Depending on who you ask, there have either been no good Sonic games ever made, or they love Sonic so much that they have a Sonic body pillow. Actually, wait a minute, that's just Amy Rose. In other cases, people like Sonic games but don't want to associate themselves with the games, given how obsessed the fandom can be, especially in the huge range of Sonic OCs their fans have created. Love him or hate him, however, Sonic has managed to endure over the years in spite of having some terrible games. Sega could have given up the ghost ages ago, but the Sonic brand keeps going to this day, and we all hope that maybe the next Sonic game won't be a complete dumpster fire, as the Hedgehog has had more than his fair share of these. This is the largest franchise we've featured so far on Gaming Anniversaries in terms of number of games. Sonic the Hedgehog has had a huge number of games in 30 years, from home console games, handheld games and mobile games. This in addition to a successful film alongside multiple TV shows over the years. In total, there have been 109 games, including 38 main titles and 71 spin-offs. This is way too many games to cover sufficiently in detail, and I can certainly say that I played nowhere near the amount of games in the franchise. This is the first time on Gaming Anniversaries that I haven't even played half a franchise, but I will be going into depth on the games I've played, but also this is going to be a slight shake-up of the format so far, as this is going to be more of a general commentary on my observations of the Sonic franchise, how I got into it, how I got too far into a dark path when buying the games, and then how the franchise became one I followed on the internet but never always actually bought into. My first exposure to anything Sonic was actually the TV show Sonic Underground. UK TV station ITV actually used to license their morning television show out to a third party who ran the segment by themselves. This was GMTV and they were partly owned by Disney. As a result, on Saturday mornings ITV had a Disney themed show on Saturday mornings called Dig It. which was mostly used to show Disney Channel shows, which is where I first heard of Recess. But they also showed Sonic Underground. While I didn't really know what was going on much, it was some exposure to the blue blur. If there was a recreational TV somewhere at a hotel or a playgroup, Sonic the Hedgehog and a Mega Drive were often the console of choice when hooked up. It was another Sonic TV show, however, Sonic X, which is where I first started to really get into Sonic. If that's not an omen, I don't know what is. Even then, I wasn't actively seeking out the purchase of Sonic games initially, as I'd read gaming magazines and seen some of his recent games hadn't been received too great. When I got a GameCube at the back end of 2004, I got it for Mario Kart Double Dash, but the deal for the GameCube also included 3 other games: Spider-Man 2, Enter the Matrix, and the first game we're going to be looking at in detail in this video, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. I'd seen reviews on this game in Cube and seen the review scores, so I wasn't expecting too much out of Adventure 2 when I got it, but I thought I'd give it a chance. So it was a massive surprise that the game at the time rocketed straight to the top of my favourite video games list. I really loved it that much at the time. Since then, many games have pushed it down the list and the flaws are so much more obvious than they were, but compared to many other Sonic games, I can still go back to this one and get great enjoyment out of it. This is definitely one of Sonic's stronger outings as a video game. Set in Central City, the game opens up with a helicopter flying over the city. Interesting start to the game. Then they report cargo status with captured blue hedgehog on board. Wait, Sonic has been captured? Why? It doesn't take long until Sonic escapes and takes a piece of the helicopter, throwing himself out of the aircraft and spinning down to the ground. And so begins Sonic Adventure 2. Or at least, that's where you'd think the game starts, but that's how the hero story starts. The actual start of the game happens quite a bit of time before that, where Sonic's arch nemesis Dr. Eggman has broken into Prison Island after hearing of a top secret military project, which he himself hopes to harness for his world domination schemes. You actually then get to play as Eggman as he breaks into Prison Island in this shooter segment. At the end of the level, Eggman enters a password as well as bringing a Chaos Emerald that he came into possession of to unveil the project, only to be met with an unwelcome surprise. Hang on though, last time I saw Sonic, he was blue and his spikes were going the other way. Eggman, with his supposed 300 IQ, quickly realises this isn't Sonic. This is actually a new character introduced to this game, Shadow the Hedgehog. Shadow calls Eggman Master, and that he can grant Eggman one wish. He also tells Eggman to bring more Chaos Emeralds and to meet him at the space colony. So, Eggman sets off to find the other Chaos Emeralds, but ends up finding the Master Emerald instead. Not exactly what he was looking for, but he takes it amid Knuckles the Echidna having to defend it from a new character. And you wonder why some Sonic fans are incredibly hardcore when the main series has characters like this one. Rouge the Bat is probably the most risque character the Sonic franchise has ever had, and to be honest, the game isn't very on the nose about this at all, especially when it comes to the soundtrack. Anyway, Eggman's attempt to steal the Master Emerald fails as Knuckles shatters it into pieces to defend it. This, ironically, forces Knuckles in a quest to restore the Master Emerald and stop the hooker from collecting all the missing pieces as she loves jewels. Having failed to retrieve the Master Emeralds, Eggman travels back to his secret base inside a pyramid with the intent to use a teleporter to reach the space colony Ark. Meanwhile, Shadow is causing havoc in the city, and he is revealed to have made a promise of revenge to a girl named Maria, who just so happens to be Eggman's cousin, or former cousin. We'll get to that a bit later. For now, Shadow's edgy attitude and villainous mindset is driven by a promise of revenge, and it's clear he desires something far more destructive than Eggman's simple plan to take over the world and build Eggman Land. Sonic runs away from the pursuing gun troops, the name of the military in this game, only to find a giant walking mech that he has to battle. After this battle, Sonic and Shadow cross paths for the first time, and it all makes sense to Sonic as to why he's been captured. Shadow is holding a Chaos Emerald and shows he has a special ability. He is able to tap into the power of Chaos Emeralds to warp and match Sonic's high speed. After introducing himself to Sonic, he tells him he's the world's ultimate life form, before teleporting away just as the gun troops arrive to capture Sonic. While Eggman is teleporting to the space colony Ark, Rouge sneaks into his base for some unknown reason, following him and finding 3 keys in order to open the way to the transporter. As Eggman travels to the Ark to meet with Shadow, the whole plan is revealed. Shadow reveals that the Eclipse Cannon, a device that is capable of destroying an entire planet, developed by Professor Gerald Robotnik, Eggman's grandfather. Shadow tells Eggman that to activate this, he will need all 7 Chaos Emeralds. Just then, it is revealed that Rouge has been spying on them for the entire conversation, and strikes a deal with Eggman and Shadow, which Eggman reluctantly accepts because Rouge knows where the other Chaos Emeralds are. This location is Prison Island, which also happens to be where Sonic is being held captive. So yeah, Prison Island is a major chapter in this game's storyline. That's the basic early story for Sonic Adventure 2. The opening to this game is iconic. Playing as Sonic, you surf down the streets of Central City on a piece of helicopter being used as a board. The gameplay is simple. Run fast, collect rings, avoid enemies, run around loop-the-loops and get to the end of the level. Simple. The game does spice things up a bit with a new feature. Adventure 2 was the first major platformer to feature rail grinding, taking inspiration from Tony Hawk, and fitting Sonic's extreme attitude persona, in collaboration with a deal with Soap Shoes. Yeah, that's the main reason why grinding is in platformers. This was integrated surprisingly well into the game, and rail grinding has become a mainstay in Sonic games ever since. It's even showed up in other platformers like Ratchet & Clank as well as Crash Bandicoot 4. But yeah, that is how the gameplay of Adventure 2 works. Or at least, that is how the main gameplay style of the game works. Sonic Adventure 2 has 3 gameplay styles depending on who you're playing as. Sonic and Shadow have the high-speed platforming levels. Tails and Dr. Eggman have mech-based shooter levels, and Knuckles and Rouge have treasure hunting levels where you have to find 3 objects in every level, usually a piece of the Master Emerald. Every time you complete a level, you are ranked based on how well you did. To get the best rank, you need to score the highest amount of points, which can be done by finishing the level as fast as possible and collecting as many rings as possible, as well as doing tricks or some other feats to get pop-ups like good or excellent. There are differences between each playstyle. In the shooter segments you need to lock onto as many targets as possible to get the big points, while the treasure hunting segments reward you for not using hints to find the treasure. The treasure hunt segments also have some interesting segments. Rouge's levels are in general significantly harder than Knuckles, as Egg Quarters has this giant beast of death that travels around the level with which you have to avoid the laser sights or you take damage. Security Hall must be beaten in 5 minutes, and Mad Space is a level that nobody likes, not helped by the fact that all the hints are written backwards, forcing you to stop for several moments to actually try and read these hints properly. But, rather strikingly, this is the first game I've ever seen to incorporate spherical worlds. The idea of travelling on a round object in a video game was shown off in a tech demo for the GameCube called Mario 128, but Sonic Adventure 2 incorporates this mechanic into the Mad Space level as Rouge sticks to the surface of these planets and can even dig into them. Of course, the implementation of this is a bit wonky, but the fact that this game was experimenting with space platforming a whole 6 years before Nintendo would refine it. What's that old saying? Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Or Dreamcast in this case, I guess. The controls are quite simple. The A button jumps, the B button does the spin dash, and the roll, and allows you to pick up objects, and the light dash. Okay, the B button does just about everything. In the original Sonic the Hedgehog games, you could play the entire game with just one button. This philosophy behind Yuji Naka's game design, which worked wonders on the original Mega Drive, but with games becoming more complex, it perhaps was starting to show its problems with this game. The fact that there was a button on the controller that is dedicated to cycling through actions on the B button perhaps demonstrates the fact that this game needed more substantial use of the available buttons on the controller. But I suppose you don't really want to be making things too complicated for Sonic's mainstream audience. Metroid Other M has the same problem of having simple controls for a game that clearly needed a lot more buttons, but the problems are a fair bit more noticeable in Sonic games. Now, let's talk about tutorial characters.
Hey, listen! Hey, listen! Hey, listen!
Stay in the Zelda video, Navi! Dang it!
Hey, listen!
Sonic Adventure 2 has Oma Chow, a robotic chow that gives you advice whenever you run into him.
Hi, I'm Omo Chow. I'm here to help you. Press B button to do a somersault. This comes in handy when you want to break the wooden container. Jump on the rail and get ready to grind your way down. Oh!
Trust your feelings, got to live and love. I know it's so luck that I'm waiting through.
Where am I? Did you know that there are 15 animals living in this
Yes, you could attack the tutorial character in this game. It's amazing. It's like Sega knew how annoying people might find the tutorial characters and gave you the option to attack him if you wanted. This is amazing inclusion. Keep this in mind later because this is the best Sonic has ever done help and advice in games. Prison Island is a bit of a hotspot for all these types of levels as everyone except Knuckles goes there as part of the main storyline. Tails and Eggman fight each other as Tails comes to Prison Island to save Sonic, while Amy mistakes Shadow for Sonic. Honestly, I don't know why all the characters keep making this mistake. Shadow looks quite distinct. Speaking of Tails, we're going to talk about his voice acting.
There's no mistake about it. This must be the island. It's a secret military base that is reinforced and super strong. It's called Prison Island. I heard the news about it on satellite TV. I still can't believe that Sonic destroyed the military building or robbed the bank. Wait for me, okay, Sonic? I'm on my way.
Yeah, using actual little boys for voicing young male characters doesn't really work long term. It would take a few more years for Sega to wisen up to this. But yeah, Sonic is a character known for his attitude, which is a very 90s type of attitude. Brought forward, however, it can be considered that a lot of Sonic dialogue is incredibly cringeworthy. I don't think I've seen a series mocked more for its voice clips than Sonic has been. The most famous voice line comes towards the end of the Prison Island segment. After Rouge steals 3 Chaos Emeralds in the most annoying stage in the entire game, she gets herself trapped in a safe following a boss battle against a flying giant robot. Sonic is freed by Amy and Shadow rushes to try and release Rouge from prison. Eggman has rigged Prison Island to blow up. Quite how blowing up an island works, I don't know, but this is a video game so I shouldn't really ask questions. But it's here that Sonic and Shadow meet each other for the second time and their first fight in the game. The dialogue between these two is legendary.
Hey, that's...
That blue hedgehog again, of all places.
I found you, Faker.
Faker? I think you're the fake hedgehog around here. You're comparing yourself to me? Huh? You're not even good enough to be
I'll
my
make you eat those words.
There's no time to play games. You won't even get the chance.
After the battle is over, Sonic discovers that the island is set to blow up while Shadow travels to the safe where Rouge is kept. Wait, how did Shadow get into the safe? Plot contrivance pretty much. This game is full of Deus Ex Machina. We're going to see another one later on. Shadow uses Chaos Control to help Rouge escape. Sonic reunites with Tails and Prison Island blows up. After a catch up with Knuckles as he continues to search for Master Emeralds, and a flashback sequence with Shadow, we have a scene with Rouge where she tries to get Shadow to soften up a bit. However, Shadow rebuffs this. Despite only having 6 Chaos Emeralds, Eggman decides to fire the Eclipse Cannon in order to start his plan. He blows up half of the moon with the Eclipse Cannon to get the entire world to submit to him, but only succeeds in creating fear. The charge up time for the next blast was too long for Eggman's liking, and Shadow tells him that all 7 emeralds will be necessary to reactivate the cannon. The final emerald is revealed to be in possession of Tails, who is given it as a prize for his role in the events of Adventure 1. I never actually played Adventure 1, but have seen many playthroughs on the internet, so now it seems as good a time as any to go over this game, given its plot significance to Adventure 2. Sonic Adventure was the first true 3D Sonic game. Sorry Sonic Jam, Sonic R and Sonic 3D Blast, and was the main title for the Dreamcast. The game was developed after Sega of America failed to make a 3D Sonic game for the Sega Saturn, so the burden fell to Sega of Japan to do so instead. Then, after the Saturn was canned, Sega developed the game for the Dreamcast instead. The game was later ported to the GameCube as Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut, and I did read a review of that game in Cube which wasn't very favourable towards it, which did make me pass on the game at the time. I never felt the need to actually play the game for myself since then. The plot of this game was turned into an entire season of Sonic X though, so I could see the events of that game in that show. The game's plot saw Eggman, or Dr. Robotnik as he was still called then, try to harness a monster known as Chaos, looking to feed it the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Sonic runs around trying to stop him. Simple game. Or is it? When you delve into the other characters' storylines, the plot becomes a bit more interesting. This game shows how Tails met Sonic in the first place, and he starts the game as a pretty much an understudy. By the end of his storyline, he becomes a hero in his own right after getting separated from Sonic and stops Eggman's missile strike on Station Square. There's also new character E-102 Gamma, part of an armada of robots created by Eggman, the E-Series. He sends them out on missions as part of Eggman's evil plans, but after guarding Amy's prison cell, Amy manages to convince Gamma to question his own programming. Amy is accompanied by a Flicky in this game, who she is helping to find its lost friends, which just so happen to be in all of the E-Series robots. Gamma's story turns into the most tragic of the lot, and he goes out to save his friends by killing the other E-Series robots, eventually succumbing to his own destruction and free the Flicky inside. Godspeed, Gamma. All the characters get transported to the past at various points during the game, as new character Tickle, part of the same tribe Knuckles is from, tries to tell them the story of Chaos, how he was created to protect the Master Emerald and the Chow. The actions of the Echidna tribe forced Chaos into a formidable rage, and he transformed into perfect chaos. Tikal imprisoned Chaos in the Master Emerald before it could destroy the world, but Eggman broke the Master Emerald to release Chaos, which forced Knuckles to try and reassemble it. The whole Master Emerald mythology thing does eventually tie into Sonic Adventure 2. We'll get to that one later. This game's most infamous gameplay seems to come from Big the Cat, whose entire levels are based around fishing. He's just a dumb cat that lives with a frog which just so happens to swallow a Chaos Emerald and grow a tail, so Eggman is seeking out Froggy in order to take back the emeralds. Chaos does eventually betray Eggman, and in the game's final act seeks to destroy the world. But with the power of friendship, the Chaos Emeralds are revived for Sonic's use, and he goes on to fight Perfect Chaos.
My quest is to kill Chaos.
Stop it from destroying Station Square completely, though the city is still in ruins, despite Tails' insistence that all's well that ends well, right? And calm Chaos down after it sees the Chow living in peace. We'll talk about Chow a bit more later. Back to Adventure 2. So yeah, Tails has the last Chaos Emerald. Unfortunately, the news articles that Rouge has found clue the villains into the fact that Tails has the Chaos Emeralds. So the rest of the game sees the two teams in conflict with each other as Eggman seeks to get the last Chaos Emeralds, while Sonic, Tails and Amy set out to destroy the Eclipse Cannon. Knuckles' search for the Master Emerald eventually sees him join up with Sonic, Tails and Amy, and the four invade Eggman's base to use a rocket to get to outer space and reach the space colony Ark. Why they use a rocket when Eggman has a teleporter directly to the space colony, I have no idea. Rouge is revealed to be a government spy who was looking to get information on the ultimate life form, but expresses surprise at her findings when hacking into the computers in the Ark, as the ultimate life form she finds there looks nothing like Shadow. Tails has created a fake Chaos Emerald with the intent of putting this in the Eclipse Cannon control room, which seems incredibly unsafe given there seems to be a bottomless pit surrounding that big long hallway, will destabilise the Eclipse Cannon and destroy it. But Eggman sees right through the ruse, with his computer giving him two distinct readings. He captures Tails and Amy and threatens to kill them both, unless he gets the last Chaos Emeralds. Sonic sees that he can use this situation to his advantage and must navigate the ridiculously difficult Crazy Gadget level, including its last room, which I got stuck on for ages because I thought there was a sideways jump that you had to make in order to progress, and I kept dying as a result. However, the whole thing turns out to be a trap. Eggman asks Sonic to put the emerald in a certain place, which happens to be a capsule dispenser. Sonic is jettisoned into space, and Eggman quickly now demands Tails give him the last Chaos Emeralds. But Tails is still scarred by who he thinks is a now dead friend, and fights Eggman for revenge. Regardless of the outcome, Eggman is able to grab the last Chaos Emeralds. Now, time for the biggest Deus Ex Machina in the game, because you really didn't think Sonic was dead, did you? No, he manages to use Chaos Control with a fake Chaos Emeralds to teleport outside the capsule to the Ark exterior, where he is found by Knuckles, who had been fighting Rouge in order to secure the remainder of the Master Emerald. After his final battle with Rouge, he has now collected all the pieces of the Master Emeralds and comforts Sonic after Sonic's near-death experience. Sonic asks Knuckles to help Tails and Amy while he makes the decision to slam the fake emerald in the Eclipse Cannon itself. I have been trying to rationalise this part of the game and wonder why Sonic was able to use Chaos Control and whether it was due to a connection to Shadow, and eventually came to realise that the writers wrote themselves into a corner and needed a last minute excuse to keep Sonic alive. Meanwhile, Rouge, done with trying to get the pieces of the Master Emerald, confronts Shadow about what she found out on the computer, raising the question on who Shadow really is. Is he really the ultimate life form? Are his memories real? Frankly, Shadow doesn't care, and when he hears someone heading towards the Eclipse Cannon, he sets off to give chase. That someone, of course, turns out to be Sonic. The final battle of the game's two campaigns sees Sonic and Shadow race down an endless space hallway, trying to damage each other. This battle can be quite tricky, as the platforms fall down if you take too long, and the other Hedgehog gets access to special moves which damage you and disrupt your rhythm. But at the end of the game, if you beat the hero story, you see the Eclipse Cannon destroyed as it tries to fire again, presumably with all 7 Chaos Emeralds, and Sonic ends the campaign with a thumbs up. But if you look at the cutscene carefully, you see that Eggman grabs the Chaos Emerald having been defeated. So basically, both endings are canon, and this is because this isn't actually the ending of the game. After Eggman puts the Chaos Emerald into the cannon, instead of causing the cannon to fire, he unknowingly triggers a procedure set in place by his grandfather, Gerald Robotnik. It turns out Maria's death drove Gerald insane, and he intended to re-engineer the ultimate life form and the space colony Ark into a weapon of mass destruction in order to avenge his granddaughter's death, blaming humanity and the government for the incident. He announces a death sentence for every human being on planet Earth, and the space colony Ark is now headed on a collision course towards Earth. Humanity will be destroyed if the colony reaches planet Earth. Eggman revels in the madness that his grandfather caused, before eventually coming round to the fact that if Earth is destroyed, he won't have a planet to take over. So Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Eggman and Rouge hatch a last-ditch attempt to stop this plan. Knuckles stated at the beginning of the game that the Master Emerald is capable of neutralising the powers of the Chaos Emeralds, so in a marathon of a final stage where you play as everyone, The gang travels to the very heart of the Eclipse cannon itself. There, they are confronted by a monstrous sight. It turns out that the documents that Rouge found were of the prototype of the ultimate life form, and this thing shows up to stop you from interfering with Gerald's plan. Meanwhile, Amy questions Shadow on why he wasn't helping everyone else with the mission. Shadow feels he doesn't need to help everyone, as they seem to be doing well without them, but Amy pleads for Shadow to really help. This triggers something in Shadow's memory. It turns out Shadow was misremembering what exactly Maria's promise was. It wasn't a promise of revenge, but to actively help out everyone and give them a chance to be happy. With this revelation, Shadow has a change of heart and decides to help everyone else by confronting his prototype. We have a battle of the ultimate life forms on our hands. Now it's time to talk about the boss battles in this game. The main reason we're talking about this now is that this boss right here, the Bio Lizard, is one of the hardest boss battles I've ever had to face in a video game. Most of the boss battles in this game have been against gun mechs, or there have been character fights between the two characters representing each playstyle. Or they're the other one-off fights, like King Boom Boo, which totally wasn't ripping off Mario in any way, and the Egg Golem. The Bio Lizard is something else entirely. This boss is super hard, and with the benefit of hindsight, I can now see that it's actually quite a cheap boss battle. The basic premise is that the lizard covers the entire stage, and is constantly rotating around this pit, forcing you to run away. Problem is, the mechanics are optimised for speed, so if you run too far, the Bio Lizard starts rotating the other way and waving its tail. The boss battle is also extremely long, and you're extremely fragile. You need to have quick reactions to his energy attacks and dodge them before you can then grind up the side of his neck to be able to attack the weak spot. But eventually this changes, and instead you have to homing attack onto energy pellets in order to reach the weak spot. This part was something I could never figure out, and was one of the reasons I found this fight so hard. That fact that while you're running around this pit, do remember that it's not completely symmetrical. The Master Emerald Shrine is at one end, but at the other end, an onrushing current is there to whisk you away to instant death and forcing you to restart the fight if you forget where this pit is, which is easy to do due to the perspective this fight is fought from. This, quite frankly, is extremely cheap. You are focused on trying to avoid the Bio Lizard's head and tail, having to also remember to jump over an instant death segment in the process. Yeah, that's way too much! Suffice to say, I was so happy when I finally beat this stupid lizard for the first time, because my goodness, this guy is super annoying. I thought I'd beaten the game by that point, but it turns out that the Bio Lizard isn't quite dead yet. The Master Emerald Shrine replica is used by Knuckles and the Master Emerald to stop the Chaos Emeralds. Knuckles recites Tickle's line from SA1 and asks the Master Emerald to stop the Chaos Emeralds, at which point the Bio Lizard teleports away. After the colony continues to shake, Knuckles is confused as to why this is the case when the Chaos Emeralds have been stopped. Eggman chimes in over the radio and reveals that the prototype is still alive and determined to keep it on its collision course. Sonic and Shadow stare at each other for at least a moment and then realise what has to be done. Using the power of the 7 Chaos Emeralds, they both transform into Goku and Vegeta! Actually, it's more like just super forms, and now the real final encounter begins. Okay, seriously, Sega ripped off Dragon Ball with the whole Supersonic thing. The Chaos Emeralds are basically the Dragon Balls. At this point, the game's main theme song plays. Probably the most iconic Sonic vocal song of all time, Live and Learn by Crush 40. This song is fantastic. In the final battle, it is thankfully a much simpler affair. You have to fly towards gaping wounds in the final hazard's body, alternating between Sonic and Shadow in order to stop him, while dodging giant lasers of death as well as more energy pellets. Every minute that passes you get encouragement from everyone else. Eventually you defeat the final hazard and both Sonic and Shadow use Chaos Control to warp the space colony back to its original position in space. But it comes at a cost. Shadow was struggling to harness a super form throughout the final fight, and having finally fulfilled Maria's wish, he falls to Earth in a tragic scene and is presumed dead. I say presumed dead, this was actually where he was supposed to die, but this was retconned later due to the character's popularity. Regardless, for a series known to be as corny and cheesy as Sonic is, this ending is incredibly powerful. I still consider this to be one of the greatest video game endings I've ever seen. Not even joking there. The music that plays during this ending portrays a somber atmosphere, and the characters are extremely reflective of the adventure they have just been on. Even Eggman is willing to put his own evil ambitions aside and have a conversation with Tails over his grandfather's legacy. The game ends in the only way it possibly could.
Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog.
And that was Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Or at least the main game, because dang, there is so much to do in this game. Each level has an additional 4 missions to it, each with their own requirements. Characters have upgrades, and there is an upgrade in every level, but some require you to backtrack in order to be able to obtain them. There is a dedicated kart racing mode expanded from the 2 kart racing stages of the main story, with its own trials to complete. The multiplayer is genuinely fun, even if perhaps there is some limitation to it. It's still one of the strongest multiplayer modes in a Sonic game. Finally, a boss rush mode sees you take on all the game's boss battles. Completing main levels earns you an emblem, which counts up to 31 emblems for beating the main game, as well as 3 other emblems for beating the hero, dark and last stories. But that's only a fraction of the emblems on offer, as you also get emblems for doing the other 4 missions on every level, so this accounts for 158 emblems in total. But even that isn't everything, as kart racing and boss rush account for a strong amount of collected emblems. Getting all the A ranks earns you emblems, and also earns additional unlockables. In total, there are 180 emblems to collect, but I haven't even talked about one of the modes that is a significant contributor to the emblem count, and quite frankly, the part of the game that can last a lifetime, the Chow Garden. Yes, as if a full campaign, multiplayer and minigames weren't enough, there's an entire virtual pet simulator in this game, and it's incredibly robust and feature rich. There's an incredible amount of depth to this, and it's tied to playing the levels. Finding a Chow key in a level allows you to visit the Chow Garden after a level. Defeating enemies earns chaos drives, and sometimes animals, which you can then feed to your Chow, upgrading its stats in the process. After some time, Chow will reincarnate and be reset. The theory is that you're supposed to use this to build a monster of a Chow, which can then participate in the Chow races and Chow karate, in order to hopefully earn those missing emblems. This part is something I never actually managed to do, mind. But yeah, this Chow mode is incredibly robust, and you can raise hero or dark Chow depending on which characters you take into the Chow Garden. You can unlock 2 extra gardens, the heaven themed hero garden and the hell themed dark garden, both with their own respective remixes of the Chow Garden. This mode has contributed to a significant amount of playtime to my save file, and thanks to the fact that story mode can be replayed without actually starting a new file, this save file is the same one I started all the way back in 2004. In spite of its problems, Sonic Adventure 2 was one of the most enjoyable games I've played up to that point. I think the main factor behind this is that the game had the most substantial story I'd ever seen in any video game up to that point. Before this, I'd played games like Pokemon and Crash Bandicoot, which had storylines, but they were never anything too substantial, and there weren't really too many plot twists. Well, okay, Pokemon had them, but Pokemon's story was never overly substantial. Movie tie-in games had a bigger plot, of course, but then if you'd seen the movie, or in the case of Harry Potter, read the books, you knew what was going to happen. This also came down to playing a lot of games on handheld, and only a few on PC. From that kind of perspective, the sheer scale and variety of things to do in Sonic Adventure 2 Battle floored me, and I've gone back to this game multiple times in order to try and map up the missing emblems. This game's soundtrack is one of my all-time favourite gaming soundtracks. There's just so many good tunes in this game, and of a large variety. While I'm not the biggest fan of Knuckles' rap tunes, the rest of the soundtrack is a gem across all different modes. Tunes like Hidden Base, Prison Lane, Lost Colony, Pyramid Cave, Egg Quarters, Cosmic Wall, Metal Harbour, Crazy Gadget, Final Rush, Cannon's Core, Skyrail, Chow Race, Hero Chow Garden, and of course Live and Learn are some of my favourite video game tunes, and they are all in this one game. This soundtrack is absolutely stacked, and they knocked it out of the park with this OST. Sonic games without a doubt have some of the greatest OSTs gaming has ever seen. However, the fact that I liked this game so much had a long-term effect on my game buying habits. Naturally, if I like something so much, I tend to get obsessed with it. Having autism does that to you. And so was the case here. I became convinced that the press criticisms of Sonic games were moot, and the things they were calling the games out for didn't matter to me. I became convinced that these games were offering a substantial amount of things that I actually liked in a video game. I couldn't have picked a worse time to pick up this attitude, as the truth is that the Sonic series was on a slow descent until it hit its absolute lowest ebb in the mid-2000s. But me being the ignorant autistic person I am, even at the age of 14, decided to ignore this substantial trend in pursuit of more Sonic content, which led me to picking up In contrast to the super story-rich adventure games, Sonic Heroes was attempting to take things back to basics and be a more accessible game with a simple storyline. Eggman says that in 3 days he will conquer the world and challenges Sonic to try and stop him. That's it. Okay, there's a slight bit more to it than that. Sonic Heroes doubles the number of playable characters from Adventure 2 in perhaps an example of unhinged ambition. There are now 12 playable characters in the game, but you play as 3 at a time. This is Sonic Heroes' new gimmick. The 12 characters are separated into 3 teams. Team Sonic, Team Dark, Team Rose, and... Wait a minute. Shadow's in this game? Didn't he die in Adventure 2? Well, that's the thing. The Team Dark storyline is set up as a big mystery, as everyone thought they died in Adventure 2. But Rouge is confused as to why he is still alive. The events of this game go on to set up a big mystery that is never fully resolved by the end of it. I wonder how they're going to resolve that. I'm sure people will like whatever sequel that resolves it. Sonic Heroes revives the original structure, but in 3D. It's perhaps the closest game we've ever had that replicates the original game's level formats, but in 3D. Though with some noticeable differences. The levels are defined as their own distinct stages, but paired up into 2s, like acts from the original 2D games. So Seaside Hill is followed by Ocean Palace, and then there is a boss battle. Then it's Grand Metropolis, which is followed by Power Plant as the city world. The latter be a contender for one of the worst 3D Sonic levels ever created. Then it's the Casino World. You can clearly see what they were going for in this game. This game was my introduction to special stages in Sonic games. Finding a key for the level allows you to access a special stage, but getting the key in the first level doesn't do much for you. Getting it in the second level, however, allows you a crack at the Chaos Emeralds. These start off relatively simple, but get increasingly hard. I recall Bingo Highway special stage in particular took forever to actually complete, so for a long time I never actually was able to get to the true ending of the game. The levels in this game have some cool ideas to them, but in general I like the latter half a bit more. Frog Forest with its tropical setting and Frog Rain was pretty unique. Hang Castle flipping the entire level upside down was extremely trippy, but extremely creative at the same time. It was also quite annoying. Mystic Mansion was also a complex level, but for different reasons, although with some teams it was rather annoying to try and beat. And Final Fortress has this rather eerie atmosphere to it all. Sonic Heroes' biggest gimmick is its team-based mechanics. You have 3 characters. One of them is Optimum and going extremely fast, one of them is capable of flight, and one is a powerhouse fighter. Pressing the X or Y button on the GameCube version switches your formation, and therefore the lead character, and you need to be able to use certain formations for certain characters. Having it on a rotating wheel causes problems. It's incredibly easy to switch to the wrong character, and in a fast-paced game the need for precision switching is necessary. It would be better in my opinion to assign each team member to a permanent button to switch when you need to. And yes, once again, the B button does almost everything except for jumping, which is handled by the A button. There are differences in how certain characters perform though. Knuckles, a newcomer E123 Omega, the last in the E series, who has gone rogue and wants to eliminate all of Eggman's robots in a throwback to Gamma, fight by using their fists, while their teammates are used as weapons that the power character wields. But Big the Cat, yes, he's in the game, and returning character Vector use their teammates as cannonballs. You can also get a screen nuking power-up called the Team Blast, which destroys everything in the vicinity. You will need it, because enemies are unfortunately more resilient in this game. No more one-shot kills on enemies anymore. This time, enemies have health bars, which makes it better to use power characters to help deal with them. But it also causes a few issues when multiple homing attacks on aerial enemies are needed to beat them. Some of the speed characters can perform triangle jumps in order to jump between walls, a new mechanic to this game. SBO can even stick to walls while he does this, being a ninja and all. Amy completely lacks this ability, which limits her options as to areas she can get to. The flight characters are all pretty similar. Tails, Rouge, Cream and Charmy all feel rather similar to each other. The last team on the list may look unfamiliar. They were certainly new characters to me. SBO, Charmy and Vector make up Team Chaotix. Conveniently enough, they first appeared in a Sega 32X game called Knuckles Chaotix, a game from which all accounts I've heard isn't very good, but it is a Sonic game, and thus we nevertheless have to acknowledge it in the pantheon of Sonic games. The characters' origins have been completely redesigned for this game, and they run a detective agency. One day, they receive a call from a mysterious client, who gives them a set of missions to achieve. So you can't just finish levels. You have to traverse linear levels and really explore them to achieve your objective. Some are easier than others, but there are some missions where you have to kill every single enemy in a level, and they suck. Hopefully the Sonic team don't think they are good ideas and try to repeat them again, because that would be an extremely bad idea. Oh wait, they did? Oh yeah, we'll get to that one later. Oh, let's not forget that this game always wants to make sure that you know what you're doing, because the characters never shut up with telling you stuff!
Be careful not to fall off.
Of course! There's a bottomless pit! I can see it with my own eyes, thank you! At least Sonic Adventure 2 made all advice optional. This one just shoves it in your face, and this is not particularly ideal. Is it any wonder tutorial characters have developed a reputation in video games for being annoying? There is a strong implication throughout the game that all the campaigns take place at the same time. But how could that be when all the characters are fighting Eggman? Well, you see, they aren't fighting Eggman. The real Eggman has been imprisoned in his own air armada and is the client for... The Eggman you've been fighting all along is in fact Metal Sonic, making his 3D debut in Sonic games. Well, kind of, unless you count the fact that he was a playable character in Adventure 2's multiplayer, but you get the gist. Metal Sonic was a character in the 1993 Mega CD game Sonic CD, and is a fan favourite character, so bringing him into 3D and making him the main antagonist for this game seemed like a good idea. He is revealed to be copying lifeform data from people like Shadow, Chaos and Team Sonic in order to learn from them for some unknown goal. When you collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds, Metal Sonic's ultimate goal is revealed. He simply wants to defeat Sonic and replace him. The final fight ensues as Team Rose, Team Chaotix and Team Dark all look to weaken Metal Sonic before Sonic transforms into Super Sonic and Tails and Knuckles get these lame shield forms for the final encounter of Metal Sonic. There's a special unique Team Blast for this fight, only as you take down Metal Sonic, while What I'm Made Of by Crush 40 plays. Metal Sonic is defeated thanks to...
The real superpower of teamwork!
The most corny line in Sonic the Hedgehog history, and that's saying something. All the teams go their separate ways as chase Eggman for their pay, and the game ends in a similar valley to how the opening scene began. I managed to get all the emblems in Sonic Heroes, which is something I didn't manage to do in Adventure 2, but I can safely say this game is inferior to Adventure 2. Not to say it's a really bad game, but it's a step back for sure. The increased top speed of the game leads to recklessly running into obstacles, and the game feels a lot slippier as a result. The mission-based structure of does bring the game down slightly and makes some levels quite tedious. This kind of structure worked in Adventure and Adventure 2 because the levels were designed around it, but in this game all the characters use the same levels and this structure does not suit the intended gameplay style of Team Chaotix. Their theme song is awesome though. While I was playing Sonic Heroes, I got a gaming magazine which in its news section showed glimpses of the next major Sonic game. At the end of Team Dark's storyline, Rouge discovers a huge army of shadow androids. This seems to be the jumping off point for the next game because the screenshot showcases the new Sonic game would actually be a Shadow game. A game entirely dedicated to the character of Shadow the Hedgehog, who quickly became a fan favourite. This ending was the main reason behind my interest in getting this new game, as I wanted to find out more about this, with the reason as to how Shadow survived his fall from space still unexplained. Unfortunately, him getting his own game would kill his reputation forever. We'll get to that game later though. The next Sonic game I actually got was on PC, where I saw the chance to try out 2D Sonic, which I'd seen as more highly praised than 3D Sonic. So, I picked up Sonic & Knuckles Collection. I'm going to say, it took me a while to get into this one. I played through Sonic 3 a bit, and also Sonic & Knuckles, before realising they were meant to be played as just one game, and eventually committed to a playthrough of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. The game had an annoying bug where it would run about 4 times the speed if it was minimised in Windows, and only putting it to full screen actually solved the problem. The patch to fix this bug was long gone by the time I knew of the fix. Sonic 3 begins with Sonic and Tails on the Tornado, flying to Angel Island. Sonic has all the Chaos Emeralds at the start of the game. Awesome! Then Knuckles show up for the first time in the series and steals all the Chaos Emeralds. At this point in the series, this was Knuckles' first game and he was depicted as a villain. The game begins with Angel Island Zone and is pure classic Sonic. The game is really good, possibly one of the best games we're going in depth with in this video. That classic gameplay is in full swing here, with some enhancements. There are multiple routes to take in levels, and lots of secrets to discover, including multiple bonus games, and the introduction of the Blue Sphere game, one of the more notable Sonic the Hedgehog bonus stage styles. Knuckles shows up multiple times to disrupt your progress, and every level has a boss at the end of it. Though with 2D Sonic, the bosses tend to be a relatively simple affair of just keep jumping on the boss until they go down. There are variances of course. Hydro City has a boss which stirs up the water current, making it harder to hit, while Marble Garden has a boss where you're hanging off Tails and have to jump towards Robotnik to damage him, and then land back in Tails' arms. The Sonic 3 portion of the game sees you go from Angel Island to Hydro City to Marble Garden, then to Carnival Night Zone, which I got stuck on forever, and it's all because of this stupid rotating drum that is extremely finicky and you have to push it down by a certain amount in order to get through the level. Who thought this was a good idea? A bloss on what has otherwise been one of the strongest Sonic games we've looked at so far. I do mean that. In many ways, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is one of the definitive Sonic experiences. Or at least it was. Another game we'll look at later might well have replaced it. A lot of the cringy, niggling issues found in the 3D games are non-existent here. The story is told through actions alone, and the level design is solid. After Carnival Night comes Ice Cap Zone, the first snow level in any Sonic game, and then it's Launch Base, which was the final level for the original Sonic 3, the location where Eggman is launching his Death Egg. Sorry, need to remember he's still called Robotnik at this point. You can tell that 3 and Knuckles is supposed to be the one game because the Sonic and Knuckles levels are much harder than Sonic 3. Mushroom Hill is fine, but Flying Battery is very difficult to navigate and has a lot of tricky sections. Though given its reappearance in a later game in this video, I am more competent with it now. Sandopolis Zone though? Boy, this level is an absolute nightmare. This level was so hard, especially that Act 2 where you have to keep the lights on as much as possible. It took me forever to get past that. I didn't get much further than the following first act of Lava Reef Zone either. That is where my playthrough ended, in part due to the technical performance stuff and fast running with the PC port, but also because I was playing on a study PC and effectively had limited time to actually play on it. This is what turned me off PC gaming. That and the fact that the best computer to play the game on was technically a work computer, whereas on console I could just plug the controller in and play. So as a result, I never finished Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and it's always been one of those games I wish I was able to finish. It was hard, no doubt, but very rewarding. In fact, I have barely played much of the old Mega Drive era Sonic games, save for one in particular. I ended up watching most of them on YouTube, but we will nevertheless go over all the classic era games that I wasn't able to go over. Shoutouts to DeathScythe on Discord for some of the insight I am about to bring on these games. First up, the original Sonic the Hedgehog, the game where it all started. This game laid the foundations for Sonic games going forward, but the lack of a spin dash and some counterintuitive level design means it's an inferior game to its sequels in every way. There are also a few Sonic the Hedgehog games on Master System, the console that came before the Mega Drive. Given Sonic came out in 1991, that means that the Master System got some extremely late support into its life. Actually, the game was meant for the Game Gear, but Sega decided to release it on the Master System. The premise is the same as Sonic the Hedgehog 1 on Mega Drive, but the level design and some of the music is completely unique. Similar story with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but with that particular Mega Drive counterpart, I was able to actually play it. We'll get to that one later. Sonic the Hedgehog CD is a game I've never touched and barely seen playthroughs of on YouTube, so I must admit it hasn't quite looked as good as Sonic 2 or Sonic 3 and Knuckles. CD is a particularly notable game, however. Made in Japan for the Mega CD system, this game debuted Amy and Metal Sonic and expanded on exploration by having Sonic travel into the past and destroying generators. Sonic Spinball is Sega's first attempt at a Sonic pinball game. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine is a Sonic Puyo Puyo game, which knowledge of did pay off later down the line. And Sonic 3D Blast ended up being a joint release with the Saturn, just so the flagging Saturn could have a Sonic game on it. 3D Blast was made by Traveller's Tales after Sega was impressed by their Toy Story game as a swan song to the Mega Drive. There are also some Japan exclusive games such as Sonic Eraser. During the same period there are arcade-only games in Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, which feature the obscure characters Mighty the Armadillo and Ray the Flying Squirrel, Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car, Sega Sonic Cosmo Fighter Galaxy Patrol, Sega Sonic Popcorn Shop, as well as Sonic the Fighters, which does exactly what it says. Also there are educational games on the Sega Pico and Windows by the name of Sonic the Hedgehog's Game World, Tales and the Music Maker and Sonic Schoolhouse. This wouldn't be the end of educational games, as the Leapster would get Sonic X on it years later, as in an actual game. Not only that, but the Game Gear had a huge suite of exclusive Sonic games on it. As well as Sonic 1 and 2, there was Sonic Chaos, Sonic Labyrinth, Sonic Triple Trouble, Sonic Drift, Sonic Drift 2, Tails Sky Patrol, Tails Adventure and Sonic Blast. The early 90s was peak Sonic in terms of releases. Sega had made 24 games featuring the Blue Hedgehog in the span of 5 years. And I thought Activision was overdoing it a bit in the late 2000s with all its Guitar Hero releases. You could tell Sonic was a big breakout franchise for the early 90s, extremely popular, extremely marketable, and Sega milked that for all it was worth. How many franchises do you know of that get about 20 games in 5 years? I was too young to really know this period that well, of course, and the first real exclusive Saturn game, Sonic R, came out just after that. The Saturn also got a compilation called Sonic Jam to make up for the fact that the 3D Sonic game that was supposed to help sell the Saturn, Sonic Extreme, was never finished. Due to Extreme being cancelled, an enhanced Saturn version of Sonic 3D Blast was made with 3D special stages. Sonic & Knuckles Collection is a game I never finished, but I didn't even get too far in it before the next Sonic game came out. As stated before, I normally use reviews as a guide over what to buy, but with Sonic the Hedgehog I had become convinced that I was going to enjoy these games regardless of what the reviews were saying. As a result, I was all on board for the next major release in spite of all surrounding evidence pointing to a slow decline for the franchise, and this continued with the release and the purchase of Shadow the Hedgehog. In the early 2000s, the game industry was experiencing something of a revolution in terms of who made up its majority in terms of console manufacturers, as well as the types of games which were popular. With graphics getting better and Microsoft entering the games market with the Xbox, suddenly multimedia companies made up 2/3 of the gaming market, and with their widespread brand recognition were able to push Nintendo into last place in the console war, with Sony's PS2 especially selling like crazy. But something else also happened. If the industry was like a little kid since its inception, the early 2000s were the angsty teenage phase. Characters like Sonic the Hedgehog, along with mascot platformers, were considered the main genre of video games, and the common logic was that you need your own Mario, Sonic or Crash Bandicoot to succeed in the industry. But Microsoft went in a different direction, and it completely changed everyone's perception. Their premier title on the Xbox was not a 3D platformer, but a first-person shooter by the name of Halo. Around the same time, Grand Theft Auto 3 released, and it became a huge financial success. These two games overnight changed everything, and gaming was now seen as a more mature hobby. As a result, cuddly mascots like Sonic were no longer seen as prime marketing material, and many gaming franchises aiming for a lighter, softer tone switched to a more dramatically darker and edgier direction, with lots of blood and violence. Jak and Daxter abandoned the 3D platformer roots for a more GTA-style game. Prince of Persia went all metal and broody, and the amount of broody teenage-aimed games skyrocketed as publishers looked to capture a share of the market. Sega had been a few years out of the console wars by this point, and were publishing on all platforms. Having been taken over by Sammy, they wanted in on the direction the industry was going. Having been banned from giving Sonic a gun, they managed to find a workaround. They can't give Sonic a gun, but they can give Shadow one. Shadow the Hedgehog is considered by many to be among the worst Sonic games ever made. Arguably only Sonic 06 and Sonic Rise of Lyric are worse games than Shadow the Hedgehog, though a case for many other Sonic games could be made, especially from around the same era. It may therefore come as a surprise to you that I actually played a lot of this game back in the day, in spite of its terrible decisions. My tolerance for this kind of thing must be extremely high. But yeah, this was Sega's attempts to adapt to the industry around them. Shadow has a gun now and can shoot enemies with it. The amount of edge in the metal soundtrack has been cranked up to 11. One of the ending themes has the words,
Heaven can't save us, hell is a joke, no place left to go.
Each level has multiple endings, so you can choose whether you want to be a good guy or a bad guy.
You know what they say, the more the merrier.
The English localization, which has previously minced swear and mild swear words, dropped this act completely for this game, leading to a very infamous line before the Circus Park level.
Where's that damn fourth Chaos Emerald?
It's okay, this is not for kids. If there are any kids watching, I'm sorry about the language you had to hear. Please don't repeat it. Not until you're another 10 years older or so. Oh, who am I kidding? There's a generation of kids who play Call of Duty. It probably won't make a difference. So, how in a Sonic game are you supposed to choose your own path through a level where there's usually one goal and what is a linear stage? Well, remember the Team Chaotix missions from Sonic Heroes? This is basically an entire game of that. Oh no!
That's no good.
To add to everything, this game has vehicles in it. Because Halo had vehicles, therefore this game must also have vehicles. Is it any wonder this game is considered a train wreck? Shadow the Hedgehog opens with Shadow having lost his memory, setting the scene and the scenario that basically started back in Sonic Heroes. All he can remember is his name and Maria being killed. Then the sky turns red with swirling clouds, and the Covenant appear out of the sky to invade Westopolis. Oh sorry, these guys are the Black Arms. My mistake. Shadow being Shadow decides that the alien invasion is not his problem, but the leader of the Black Arms, Black Doom, real original name right there, appears and tells him that Shadow is needed to play a role in the invasion of planet Earth. He claims that Shadow promised him that he would obtain the 7 Chaos Emeralds. With no other clues to his past, Shadow ventures into the city on the hunt for the Chaos Emeralds. and so the game begins. No matter which route you take, you will find all 7 Chaos Emeralds. It's basically guaranteed. The missions you clear basically decide which level you play next. Going to the end of Westopolis takes you to Glyphic Canyon. Beating the Hero mission takes you to Lethal Highway, and beating the Dark mission takes you to Digital Circuit. So, here's the problem. You can be with the Hero mission, but still attack your allies on accident with the homing attack or shoot them with a gun. It's incredibly finicky, and the game asks you to search around the entire level for certain enemies. It can be extremely frustrating to have to backtrack because you missed one enemy, and although you can walk between checkpoints, it doesn't feel like a very Sonic thing to have in a game. Finding that one enemy is also super annoying, especially in some levels. Lost Impact has one of my favourite music tracks in the entire game, but the actual level itself is not particularly great. It takes place on the Space Colony Ark in the past, and requires you to travel on these slow moving turret sections. I'm sorry, there are turret sections in a Sonic game. What is going on?
That's no good.
It is extremely easy to miss one enemy and have to restart the entire thing because the on-rail sections don't reset. It's not as bad as its counterpart the Doom, however, which is very un-Sonic-like in how it's just a barrage of corridors with enemies to kill and very easy to get lost, especially as there's no map in either the pause screen or the HUD to help you out, and the only way to know where you are is to check the panels on the walls in rooms which have a map, meaning that unless you are able to make a mental note of the place, you're going to have no idea where you're going. Not very well thought through at all. This level is not very good, and the only thing I can really say about it is that the level has an Easter egg where Yuji Naka's name is called out by one of the gun soldiers. Killing bad guys fills your hero gauge, while killing good guys fills your dark gauge. Dark gauge gives you Chaos Blast to kill everything around the area, while Hero lets you activate Chaos Control to warp you further in the level, making it easier to finish the neutral missions. Wait, the Hero gauge helps you complete the neutral missions? That seems wrong. In some levels, it helps you beat the dark missions. I'm surprised they overlooked that one. So, actually, going for the Hero and dark routes is more annoying than it needs to be. The level is often considered acceptable, especially considering that in order to get the endings, you only have to actually reach them, and being pure Hero or pure dark is pretty much irrelevant. Also, there is no through line for your actions. Regardless of how you enter certain levels, there is no difference in the dialogue displayed. Staying on the neutral path eventually leads to Shadow deciding he is an android, as speculated upon at the end of Heroes. But if you don't play Iron Jungle, this makes absolutely no sense. This leads to a messy storyline, which seems pretty ridiculous when this game wants to give you free choice. Not to mention, you can be good for the entire game, but then do an immediate heel turn in the final level and have to fight Sonic. And despite this choose your own path thing, the game has a definitive canonical ending. What? What was even the point of having to choose your own path style of gameplay if you're just gonna end it like every other 3D Sonic game just to keep the tradition of having a final story?
You know what they say, the more the merrier.
In this final story, despite everything you've been through, Shadow comes to the conclusion that regardless of what happened in the past, which includes retcons that Professor Gerald had the assistance of Black Doom to create Shadow, he wants to put the past behind him and walk a new path regardless of what he was before. He opposes Black Doom in spite of Black Doom showing the ability to control him due to sharing the same bloodline. Shadow eventually uses the 7 Chaos Emeralds to defeat Black Doom, but you might easily miss the actual answer to what this Shadow is. The conclusion to a mystery set up by Heroes is only shown here if you stay in the final battle for 8 minutes, where Eggman reveals that after Shadow fell to Earth, Eggman saved him and made up everything about him being a robot. So the Shadow we've been playing at is the original. Eggman must have just made a bunch of androids based on his experiences working with Shadow. Well, you know, androids were designed to protect their human creators. For the glory of mankind! The ending is dumb. Everyone hails Professor Gerald as a hero for saving the planet from Black Doom, despite the fact that, you know, Gerald tried to destroy planet Earth! Shadow tosses a photo of himself and the game ends on the line, "Goodbye forever, Shadow the Hedgehog." The game's levels are a real mixed bag. Most level themes are repeated at least twice during the course of your many options, with a few unique levels like the Circus level, Air Fleet, Iron Jungle, Lava Shelter and Gun Fortress. Though, among repeated level themes like Space Colony Arc, City, Cyberspace and Canyon, they do try to mix it up a bit. Admittedly, there isn't much difference between Digital Circuit and Mad Matrix, aside from the fact that the latter has an open area which doesn't really work without access to a map and is considered extremely tedious. This level does make an association with the returning Team Chaotix and computers, as Shadow enters the level to help SBO retrieve data from inside a computer. Video games for you. But this leads into the other line this game is well known for. In the Cosmic Fall level, this is in the hero mission.
Find the computer room! Find the computer room! Find the computer room!
Is it a wonder this quote became a meme? Somehow I don't think it is. The game also continues with the multiplayer trend of the other 3D Sonic games, but this is the worst 3D multiplayer in any Sonic game. I tried it with friends. After one game, we never wanted to touch it ever again. This is pretty much summing up Shadow the Hedgehog in a nutshell. I was warned, this game got 60% in Nintendo Official Magazine, but my curiosity over the Shadow storyline in Heroes got the better of me, and I wanted to see how they were going to follow it up. This is what led me to getting to the very end of this game. Shadow the Hedgehog perhaps exaggerated the growing divide between Sonic fans and everyone else, with a growing trend of people willing to overlook the game's faults for what they were playing, and people who wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. The games were becoming increasingly try-hard, and Shadow was perhaps the peak of all of this. But just when you think the franchise has hit rock bottom, Sega made a game that even the Sonic fans hated. The release of Sonic the Hedgehog for PS3 and Xbox 360 was met with unanimous disapproval, and is the real moment Sonic hit rock bottom. I don't think I need to say much more about this game that hasn't already been said. This game was horribly rushed to meet the 15th anniversary, and as such is a glitchy mess. The storyline is straight up Z-tier fan fiction, and the only redeeming thing about it is it ends as if the game never existed, which it probably should have anyway. Also, the game's soundtrack is really good, for better or for worse. Sonic 06 is considered to be how every Sonic game gets stereotyped. Bad game, but it's going to have a banger of a soundtrack. Surely I should have dropped Sonic as a franchise by this point. Well, the truth is, I wasn't even aware of Sonic 06 and how bad it was when it came out. I didn't really browse much of the internet back then, aside from news sites, so I wasn't privy to forum discussions about the game, and I didn't really go on YouTube much then, because it was still a very new platform that I didn't really know much about. Most of my gaming news strictly came from Nintendo sites and magazines, and I paid no attention to news coming up for other consoles, because I didn't own any other consoles at the time. What did it matter to me what news about those consoles were? As a result, I heard a lot about the next Sonic game I ended up obtaining in magazines, and would be completely oblivious to the Sonic 06 fallout and discourse, until over 2 years after the game came out. Meanwhile, Wii hype was building, and in an official Nintendo magazine, they were hyping up the promise of Sonic Wildfire, a Sonic game specifically built to take advantage of the Wii. As I said in the Zelda video, I was fully on board with the Wii Remote, and really thought it would revolutionise gaming. I was looking forward to the new Wii Sonic game. Nowadays, the game isn't considered very good, and is generally disliked, but to be honest, I still think it's a pretty decent game. I am referring to Sonic and the Secret Rings. "2007 is here. The internet is still stuck in the whole Sonic 06 fallout and how disastrously bad the game was. And here I was, still not having interacted with everyone over the internet, picking up the new Sonic game on Wii. The game, as you can tell, was renamed before its release, and it eschews Sonic's extended cast for a more traditional game based on the Arabian Nights. Sonic is reading an Arabian Nights storybook when a genie named Shana appears out of the book to tell him that her world is in danger from an entity known as the Eraser Djinn. She uses her power to transport Sonic into the book in order to save it, as the Eraser Djinn is trying to get rid of all the stories in the Arabian Nights to make the whole thing his own. Sonic being Sonic is rather reluctant, but is forced to get involved, especially after Eraser Djinn curses him with a mysterious flame, which is tied to Sonic's life force. The Eraser Djinn wants Sonic to bring him the 7 world rings or lose his life. That is the premise of Sonic and the Secret Rings. The game is controlled entirely with the Wii Remote and is an auto runner. Sonic is constantly running and you hold the Wii Remote on its side, tilting it left and right to move left and right, pressing the 2 button to jump, and thrusting the Wii Remote forward for the homing attack. This control system came in for a lot of criticism that I honestly wasn't really bothered about. As far as I'm concerned, control issues come down to control preferences, and being able to adapt to different control systems for different games with different button layouts is a valuable asset. In this case, this was an example of using motion controls in possibly a suboptimal manner. Certainly, the fact that you have to tip the Wii Remote upside down in order to move backward is far from solid and is very clunky. The auto-runner nature kind of makes sense for Sonic, but when you introduce collectibles that you might want to backtrack for, then it gets a bit more awkward. Sega really missed a trick here. They were onto something, but the level design and the scale they were aiming for with Sonic games kind of detracted from the kind of game that would have been perfect on the Wii. We'll get to that particular game later. Sonic and the Secret Rings levels have multiple objectives. Aside from the full-length stages, there are also a lot of sub-challenge missions you have to beat if you want to beat the game. Some of them seemingly at random unlock story scenes. This does lead to story progress if you move on to the next level, but playing even further eventually allows you to obtain one of the 7 world rings. There are 2 endings to this game as a result. The normal one ends with you defeating Eraser Djinn and finding this mysterious door where the 7 world rings must be inserted. Mysteriously, this door looks like something on the actual book itself. Shara also reveals that the Eraser Djinn is in fact the genie of the magic lamp from the story of Aladdin, with Shara being the genie of the ring. So where does Shantae fit in all of this? After being consigned to a lamp and forced to grant wishes, when he was freed from the lamp, he had a renewed hatred of people and wanted to use his overwhelming power to remake the Arabian Nights in his own image. The levels in Sonic and the Secret Rings all have vocal themes. This is the most motivated vocal themes in a Sonic game, though the traditional Arabian music shows up from time to time. When they're mixed together, it frankly sounds amazing. Who knew that rock and Arabian music went so well together? Sonic Team apparently. And Ubisoft too, because that kind of music is also great in Moira Within. But yeah, pretty much all the main level themes are vocal themes in this game, including the main theme, which is extremely hard to forget. Starting with Sonic 06, Tomoyo Otani has become the music director for Sonic games, which is a wise decision because every Sonic game since then that he's been in charge of has had a banger of a soundtrack. However, because he was involved with Sonic 06 and then subsequently Sonic Unleashed, it was up to other Sega composers to do the music for this game, hence the larger amount of vocal themes than normal. Though, it's perhaps saying something that Levitated Ruin, the one level without a vocal track to its music, is my favourite tune in the entire game. The rock and Arabian themes complement each other extremely well, and despite any annoyances that the actual level may have in some of its missions, this music definitely helps me cope with it. Not to say that the vocal themes are bad in this game, in truth, they're something of a mixed bag. Evil Foundry has to be one of the most iconic vocal themes in the series, to the point of being one YouTuber's opening music. I really love how it started in the Ifrit Jinn boss battle, and Night Palace is another favourite of mine. After Sonic collects all of 7 rings, everything goes tits up. Eraser Djinn congratulates Shara on using Sonic to gather the 7 rings, taking control of Shara to give up the rings as Sonic begs in desperation. Shara is killed in the process, and Sonic desperately wishes for Shara not to die, a wish she cannot grant. Throughout the game, the story is told in static storybook-like cutscenes, but after Eraser Jin absorbs the 7 world rings, the pages warp into a deep hole, and Eraser Jin becomes Alf Leia Wa Leia, a being who wanted to be the new creator of the Arabian Nights. Sonic also absorbs the 7 rings to become Dark Spine Sonic, a form unique to this game. The final battle takes place with a whole lot of Wii Remote waggling, but eventually Alf Leia Wa Leia is defeated and Sonic finds the Eraser Jin's lamp. He uses the lamp to force Eraser Jin to bring Shara back to life, return the stories to the Arabian Nights to the way they were, and for the Jin to be trapped in the lamp forever. Eraser begs desperately to get Shara to stop him, but it's to no avail. Oh, and there's also one last reference to the game's running joke about Sonic being a hedgehog, not a rat. It's a pretty lame running joke, all things considered. Secret Rings has 7 major zones: Sand Oasis, Dinosaur Jungle, Evil Foundry, Levitated Ruin, Pirate Storm, Skeleton Dome, and Night Palace. I'm not counting Lost Prologue, even though that's technically also a level, but it's a tutorial level. Unfortunately, since this is on the Wii, the game has a tacked on Mario Party mode with terrible minigames that have terrible controls. I did try it a bit, but let's be honest, this multiplayer is terrible. Sonic multiplayer hit its peak in Adventure 2 and has declined ever since. This wasn't the first time Sonic tried to be in a Mario Party-like game, as we have to go back to the Dreamcast Sonic Shuffle for that. Sega attempted to replicate the success of Mario Party on the N64, which had debuted that generation, but it didn't go very well. Sonic Shuffle is regarded as one of the worst Mario Party clones created. Secret Rings got its own sequel on the Wii somehow in 2009 with Sonic and the Black Knight, which had a similar premise but with King Arthur instead of Arabian Nights. The game shifted away from the control system of Secret Rings to give you a bit more control, but it still felt on rails, and its arrival coincided with Sega actually having found a gameplay style that works for Sonic. It was a bit of an experimental era after the flop that was Sonic 06. To Black Knight's credit, it has a neat plot twist where the person you were helping the entire game turns out to be the villain, and the Black Knight was a good guy, though I don't regret not getting this game. My attitude towards Sonic games had changed by that point. We'll get onto that point later. You may have noticed I haven't mentioned anything about the handheld Sonic games during the same era. The truth is I never played any of the handheld Sonic games, at least until I played the DS game Sonic Rush. The first Sonic game on DS is coincidentally one of only 2 handheld Sonic games I ever played. Probably down to the fact that I didn't get into Sonic until I got a GameCube, so I wound up sticking to the franchise on home consoles. Even then, Sonic Rush was only a game I played half of, as I didn't actually own the game. But there was only one file available on the cartridge, so I split the campaigns with the game owner, where they would play as Sonic and I would play as Blaze the Cat campaign, with both of us taking advantage of being able to play the final story on replay to finish the game. Though in hindsight, we probably would have done it the other way round if we knew better. The aforementioned Blaze the Cat is brand new to this game. She is from another dimension, but winds up in Sonic's dimension after Eggman teams up with an alternate dimension version of himself called Eggman Naga. The two collude to merge the dimensions and take over the world together. Blaze is the guardian of the Soul Emeralds, which are her dimension's counterpart to the Chaos Emeralds. So both Sonic and Blaze have to collect their respective dimensions' emeralds. Blaze also has a bit of a story arc where she has to learn to cope with opening up to working with others after being adamant that the duty must be hers alone. The two characters travel separate paths and eventually have to face against each other after the 7th zone, and this boss battle is so stupid and fun-wrecking! I lost so many lives to this stupid boss battle, dang it! Of course, this isn't the actual final boss battle, as there's one more fight which is incredibly long and really annoying to have to start over if you mess up. This battle is in both routes, so you have to do it twice in order to finish the game, with the only difference between the Eggman that you take on. so kind of glad that I only got to play half a game. Sonic Rush is far from your classic 2D Sonic. The game introduced the boost mechanic, which dynamically changes the way you play this game. The addition of boost, as well as a trick system, encourages you to keep going fast and keep your boost gauge up as much as possible, in addition to navigating the levels. The composer for Jet Set Radio on the Dreamcast, Hideki Nagamura, also made the soundtrack for this game, which is probably going to land this video with a copyright claim, dang it!
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
He's on Twitter and has become pretty well renowned in the Twitter sphere. The game received rave reviews from critics at the time, as it was a refreshing moment of quality while the main series was in decline. However, this game is far from perfect. Dimp's level design has been severely criticised for having blind bottomless pits out of nowhere, so trying to explore these levels can lead you to your doom. Altitude Limit is incredibly guilty of this. The level order is different if you're doing Sonic or Blaze, so Blaze starts at Night Carnival while Sonic has the normal route. I would guess that you're supposed to do Sonic's route first and then do Blaze's route before getting the 7 Chaos Emeralds in the special stages. When you do this, the final story begins. Blaze is unable to defeat Eggman and Eggman Naga by herself, but with the power of friendship, Blaze is able to use the Soul Emeralds to transform into Burning Blaze, and along with Super Sonic, they fight both Eggmans in the Egg Salamander mech combined. This reverses the dimensional merge, and both characters return to their respective dimensions, with Sonic assuring Cream the Rabbit that Blaze will return to this world someday. Later games will retcon the origin of both Blaze the Cat and Eggman Naga for the worse, so I always consider this game to be the main origin for Blaze and Eggman Naga, as it was their debuts. So, though Blaze appears in Sonic 06, I always consider that as an alternate Blaze who has a relation to Silver the Hedgehog. The real Blaze came back in the sequel to Sonic Rush, Sonic Rush Adventure, which was also on the DS and another game I skipped out on. In that game, Sonic and Tails are sucked into a tornado and wind up on a lone island where they meet a one-off character, Marine the Raccoon. Exploring this island kingdom eventually reveals this to actually be Blaze's dimension, and the game unfolds from there. I can't speak much more as I didn't actually play it, only saw an LP of it. The third Rush game technically also exists under a different name, as Sonic Colors on the DS is technically an entirely different game, borrowing the home console stages, though in terms of name only, as well as being the same themes, but these are entirely different stages, naturally being on a 2D handheld side-scrolling game. The plot is also expanded to feature Sonic's extended cast of characters, including, yes, Blaze the Cat again. Someone Dimps clearly likes the character a lot. Let's quickly go over the other modern handheld Sonic games. You have Sonic Advance, which is widely considered to be the true successor to the Mega Drive games, while Sonic Advance 2 and 3 were a bit more experimental, with Sonic Advance 3 having a more substantial plot and a partner mechanic system. These games were heavily criticised by fans for their overuse of death trap pits, though it is also worth noting these games were the basis for the Sonic Flash game that everyone in IT class used to play during the IT lesson itself. Yeah, screw learning stuff in IT lessons. Let's just go on gaming websites and play Flash games. From what I can read, Sonic Advance 3's plot sees the world torn apart after an experiment by Eggman with a character from another handheld Sonic game, Sonic Battle. This game is a Sonic fighting game, the second one after Sonic the Fighters, and this one isn't very good. The GBA got another pinball game too, in the form of Sonic Pinball Party. The developers of these games first cut their teeth on the Neo Geo Pocket of all things, with Sonic Pocket Adventure. And that is all the Sonic games on GBA and DS. Wait a minute, that's not the case at all. We're forgetting the elephant in the room here. Sonic Chronicles, The Dark Brotherhood. Sonic Chronicles, a game whose reputation is down the toilet. This game has been scolded by many and criticised for its poor quality, especially on the front of the music. Why then did I decide to buy this game? Oh, it's an Other M situation all over again. I really like the Mario RPGs on handheld consoles, mainly the Mario and Luigi games, which I had played within a calendar year of this game coming out, and it only furthered my interest in a Sonic RPG. Hearing this was being done by BioWare just furthered my interest. Of course, I hadn't quite realised that BioWare's RPG expertise was in a more Western style of RPGs, which were very different from JRPGs, which is what I was used to playing, with the likes of Pokemon, Final Fantasy and Mario and Luigi. I didn't really know what the difference between a JRPG and a Western RPG was at the time. To be fair, when I played Sonic Chronicles, I was interested all the way through and was very interested when it started to expand on the story behind the Echidna tribe, which Knuckles is a part of. So, Knuckles is a major factor in this game, and this game's plot revolves around it. The story of Sonic Chronicles sees Sonic already having defeated Eggman. Well, that was a short game, let's move on to the next game, Sonic Unleashed. Okay, that's a bit premature. Sometime after Eggman's presumed death, Sonic is called by Tails while taking a break as Knuckles has been kidnapped by a gang known as the Marauders. Rouge the Bat escorts Sonic and Tails to Gun, where they learn from the Gun commander that his organisation has been watching the Marauders for some time and know where to search. Having no luck, they eventually locate the Marauders' base in the Mystic Ruins, and with the help of Big the Cat, they find Knuckles, who is found escaping from some robots. Leaving the base, they find Angel Island is gone. Devices found in their initial search help them locate Eggman, who claims to be a reformed character, revealing that he survived the crash of the egg carrier by anticipating his own defeat and making a robot that would rescue him. He informs the team that Angel Island is being pulled to Metropolis, the location of the Marauders' main base. Shadow and Omega join up with Sonic and crew in Metropolis. Metropolis watches and thoughtfully smiles. She's taking you to her home. Shout out to the one person who might have understood that reference. Anyway, everyone is attacked by the Marauders, including the character Shade. It turns out that all the Marauders are Echidnas. Knuckles thought he was the last of the Echidnas, which leaves him shocked and stunned at the revelation. It turns out that the Echidnas were imprisoned in another dimension known as the Twilight Cage, and under the command of Grand Imperator Ix, were seeking a return to Sonic's dimension. Man, there sure are a lot of alternate dimensions in Sonic games. Well, Shade thinks that Ix desires a return to Sonic's dimension, but it turns out that Ix is a generic evil villain and wants to take over Sonic's dimension. He steals the Master Emerald and retreats to the Twilight Cage. Tails and Eggman build a level to allow everyone to travel to the Twilight Cage, but Eggman stays behind, claiming he must ensure their safe return. The rest of the game takes place in the Twilight Cage. The plot is a bit simpler from here as the gang travels to each colony to acquire the 7 Chaos Emeralds from the various races around there. After acquiring the 7 Chaos Emeralds, the clans help Sonic and Co break into the Nocturnus homeworld. After that is the easiest final boss battle in history, as you defeat Ix, including Ix's super transformation given to him by the Master Emerald. I am not making this up.
Finally, a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary.
After the game is over, Sonic and Co return to their own dimension, only to find that Eggman has taken it over. And the game ends on a cliffhanger, where it says, "The end?" Then BioWare was bought out by EA, so we never got a continuation to this ending. That didn't really help Sonic Chronicles' reputation, and I think the most telling thing is that while I enjoyed it at the time I played the game, I felt no desire ever to replay the game. That in itself is a damning verdict. A lot of the plots proved to be forgettable, and the soundtrack, usually the only redeeming thing from the Sonic games, is infamously terrible. Although it didn't seem to be so bad at the time of playing, as on the DS you don't necessarily notice the compressed nature of the soundtrack, because that's what you're used to hearing on the console. And I didn't really recognise much of the music, as it came from Mega Drive and Saturn era Sonic games that I wasn't very familiar with, music wise. Many of these tunes were new to me as a result. The quality of the tunes comes down to how BioWare wanted to put classic Sonic tunes in the game, but got into trouble with Sega for doing so with very little time remaining. Whoops! The battle system is a rhythm-based combat system. Whereas Mario had a timed button press mechanic to do additional damage in his RPGs, Sonic Chronicles goes full Elite Beat Agents and requires you to follow the beat while attacking in order to do more damage. It's a system that is very unique to this game. Honestly, I don't think the battle system is that bad. I found it perfectly playable at the time, but given I never replayed the game, I can't really say for sure whether it was a good thing or not. The entire game is controlled using the touchscreen controls. This isn't anything new on DS, and is similar to Phantom Hourglass. So lots of opinions on this game are going to come down to your views on touchscreen controls. Me? I don't have much issues with touch only. There's enough space on the screen to be able to see where you're going, and icons are marked out clearly when you need to interact. Speaking of that, the game makes full use of Sonic's rather extended cast of characters to give you a custom, stable range of party members. This is a big win as far as I'm concerned. Being able to choose your party and make your own strategies is always nice in an RPG in my book. Admittedly, at the end of the game you do have to fight the final boss with two separate parties that have to be led by Sonic and Knuckles, but even so, party customization in RPGs is only ever a good thing. Then again, this is coming from the guy whose favourite game of all time lets you pick from 14 different characters to make up your party, so might have a bit of bias there. Don't really have much more to say about Sonic Chronicles. It was a game that got good reviews at the time, but over the course of time developed something of a negative reputation and is remembered as one of the worst Sonic games. Personally, I feel like it got a lot of unnecessary stick, and overall I think this is actually a pretty decent game. Not a 93% like the O&M review that came out, but what BioWare made is better than a lot of stuff Sega put out. That cliffhanger ending certainly feels rather out of place though, given that the Sonic Chronicles games never continued beyond its first entry. Meanwhile, the PSP was receiving the Sonic Rivals games, a versus take on classic Sonic that isn't really remembered very well. The fact that every level is a race doesn't really do much in that game's favour. Not to mention those games changed the origin of Eggman Naga. 2005 to 2008 was collectively known as the Dark Age of Sonic. Ironically enough, it was also the time period where I was most into Sonic. There are a few racing games during this period as a more modernised take on Sonic racing games, but with a more extreme sports angle. Those being Sonic Riders, Sonic Riders Zero Gravity and Sonic Free Riders, all of which received extremely average reviews, with Sonic Free Riders being built for the Kinect getting some particularly nasty feedback. Things were looking bleak for Sonic, but there was one upcoming game that promised to be a return to form for the Hedgehog, one that looked extremely promising going off the footage for the levels. If Sonic 06 marked the death of the adventure formula, the next Sonic game would revive Sonic's fortunes and put him back on a better course for the future. At least, it was the first step for the revival. This game, however, would prove to be the last Sonic game I bought for a very long time, that game being Sonic Unleashed. This game was a very highly anticipated game among Sonic fans. I should know because by this point I was regularly browsing internet forums. I was regularly checking in on the Sonic Unleashed thread on the official Nintendo magazine forums, where a lot of Sonic fans were eagerly anticipating the game. I kind of bought into this too. It looked dope, and an improvement over some of the recent Sonic games I played. But of course, Sega being Sega and concerned about the longevity of Sonic games, they couldn't leave it alone and introduced an unwelcome side playstyle, the Werehog. This wasn't necessarily a bad thing, as Sonic games had previously had alternate playstyles, so there was always a chance that the game could still be fantastic. I should probably note that at this point I had never heard of the Sonic cycle. Then the release date came around. Sega pretty much revealed every level in the game except for one. Review scores came out, and the game wasn't receiving the reviews everyone thought it was. Late 2008 wasn't exactly great for the Wii, as Nintendo's focus on making casual games for the rest of that year left core gamers with a lack of games to play on the console, and Sonic Unleashed was really the only game on the console released in that half of the year that I was interested in, and even then it wasn't even the main version of the game. Then I saw this comment, and it changed my outlook on Sonic forever. A bit harsh perhaps? Possibly, but for the first time I was starting to seriously consider my approach to Sonic games. I knew these games could potentially be good, but a lot of the time over-ambition just led to them being substandard. But I already committed to getting Sonic Unleashed and had made my own YouTube channel by this point. The same account I'm still using today. I wanted to get into recording games for YouTube after getting into watching others do the same, and I used Sonic Unleashed as the target game. That playthrough has aged horribly and is absolutely terrible and incomplete. Don't watch it! I recorded new footage for use in this video. Sonic Unleashed has an epic opening cutscene that takes place in outer space. Sonic boards a space station controlled by Dr. Eggman, who sends a huge armada of robots at him. Sonic speeds through, destroying all the robots, and breaks into the core of the station. He transforms into Super Sonic and is about to stop Eggman. However, the whole thing turns out to be a trap. Eggman unveils a contraption that saps Sonic of his super form and drains the energy of all the Chaos Emeralds, and the side effects cause him to transform into the Werehog. Eggman then proceeds to break the planet into 7 pieces, unleashing a monster known as Dark Gaia. Eggman ejects Sonic, but Sonic survives thanks to a mysterious green shield. To be fair, full damage doesn't exist in Sonic games, so I'm sure he would have been fine anyway. Sonic finds a mysterious creature who has suffered from amnesia, who he nicknames Chip after the creature shows a fascination with chocolate chip ice cream and Apotos. Sonic thinks this fall from space has caused Chip's amnesia, and Chip proceeds to become the tutorial character for this game.
You can press the A button to jump.
Yeah, interrupt the action, why don't you, Chip? Sonic and Chip travel the world looking to restore the power of the 7 Chaos Emeralds in the Gaia temples around the world. The locations are all brand new to this game and all based on real world locations, with Apotos, Missouri, Spagonia, Chunnan, Holoska, Shamar and Adabat all based on real life locations. Wait, where's Empire City? Should probably explain that the version of Sonic Unleashed I played was the Wii version, so the level design is significantly different. This version is looked down on as a version of the game that isn't the main version, and there are definitely many things missing in this game that are in the HD version, but the more streamlined gameplay and different level design is good. The daytime stages are awesome and a blast to play. Dimps, who had developed Sonic Rush, already know how this style of gameplay works, so Unleashed kind of feels like a 3D version of Sonic Rush, and also borrows many of the mechanics from the HD version, though not all of them. The game feels like the end product of lessons learned from making 3D Sonic games, and is all the more polished for it. Replaying this game for this video was a ton of fun, and it didn't feel like a chore at all. Finally, Sega found a 3D Sonic gameplay style that works and is good. So, what was keeping this game down for me, and why did it change my outlook on Sonic games? The reason I never finished the YouTube playthrough and uploading it was that after beating the game I simply lost all interest in the game and everything surrounding the game itself. With access to Virtual Console I was getting into Donkey Kong Country and its sequel, and that franchise was kind of the reason Sonic stood out. Funny, Donkey Kong Country was considered a major turning point in the Nintendo-Sega console war of the 90s. Another reason for this is because the majority of the game's content is actually the Werehog levels. You have to do about 3 Werehog levels for every 1 Sonic level, and it definitely pads out the game time. This increases to 4 in the later worlds, with 5 in the very last world. The Werehog gameplay is God of War inspired, where you have to go round and beat up a bunch of enemies, while the in-between parts are more puzzle platform based. Another example of Sega trying to gear Sonic to be something that was popular at the time. However, unlike other attempts to pan out the gameplay that other Sonic games have done, I didn't really have much issue with the Werehog itself, as there was a good amount of effort put into making this playable. There are only 2 major issues I have with this. First of all, in precise platforming sections, it's incredibly easy to just rush off the edge, and secondly, the Werehog battles are known for one thing and one thing only: the battle theme. This is an absolute shame, as the Sonic Unleashed soundtrack is quite frankly one of the best Sonic soundtracks there has been, certainly the best since Adventure 2. When the battle theme isn't interrupting everything, the soundtracks that do play are freaking amazing, particularly if you're playing on the Spagonia and Adabat levels. Not to say the daytime tunes aren't amazing, because they almost certainly are. Tomoya Otani did a fine job with the soundtrack, even if it did further the idea that no matter what the quality of Sonic game, it will always have a good soundtrack. As the game progresses, you eventually learn Chip's true identity. He is in fact Light Gaia, the counterpart to Dark Gaia. The two were in a constant cycle of conflict, where Dark Gaia would break the planet apart and Light Gaia would put it back together again. Chip's amnesia came about due to Dr. Eggman awakening both him and Dark Gaia prematurely. For many years in Sonic games, Eggman has talked about wanting to build Eggman Land across the entire world, and rule it as his master. In Sonic Unleashed, he finally achieves building Eggman Land, and it's the last level in the game. This level is infamously difficult in the HD version. In the Wii version it's a challenge, but certainly more bearable. It's split up into multiple levels here, and daytime Sonic and nighttime Sonic do not intersect. The daytime stage was certainly the hardest in the game. It took me so many attempts to do this level. The nighttime level was grueling, but it was quite doable in the end. At least I think it was. I don't really remember my original attempt that well, and I never uploaded it to YouTube because that was past the point where I stopped uploading my footage. However, I'll be able to play these stages again for this video, so I have a bit more better idea about how they actually were. The nonsensical dialogue that was in those original YouTube videos was going to end in a revelation that I was Dark Gaia or something. There, now you don't need to watch those videos. At the end of Eggman Land, the climax begins. Eggman fights you with his new Egg Dragoon mech, a mech fight which also involves the use of the Werehog. Okay, that's different. This fight is certainly one of the best fights in the game, as you tear apart Eggman's mech, while both of you descend further and further into the planet. Eventually, you reach the core, and are confronted with Dark Gaia, who absorbs all of the remaining energy from Sonic, removing the Werehog entirely. Finally, it's gone! The curse of this game is no longer with us! Dark Gaia also betrays Eggman, and the final battle starts. This is a long final battle. Chip calls on Sonic to assemble all of the temples together to create the Light Gaia Colossus. This is then used to fight and defeat Dark Gaia. And so ends Okay, it's not that simple. Dark Gaia is revived again, and it's time for the obligatory supersonic fight. This fight kind of reminds me of the final fight in Secret Rings, which only came out a year before. Anyway, Dark Gaia is defeated and the planet is saved. A scene shows the complete embarrassment Eggman finds himself in. He finally built Eggman Land, and it all got torn apart. This was the closest he'd ever come to having his plans succeed. His companion actively mocks this, as he has done during the course of the game. As Light Gaia, Chip also has to be sealed inside the planet along with Dark Gaia, so he and Sonic are forced to say goodbye, a necklace being all Sonic has to remember him by. And for real, this time Sonic Unleashed is finished. The failure to finish recording this one, as well as wavering interest and getting into Donkey Kong Country, saw me come out on the other side with a new perspective on the Sonic franchise. While I enjoyed these games, I didn't have to buy them. There were other game franchises that were worth my money more than Sonic. I'd had a time with the series, but especially with Sonic and the Black Knight being the next game coming out, and now having access to Virtual Console, I was better off changing up my gaming habits. By this point, Sonic Adventure 2 had fallen well down my list of favourite games, as I had played the 3 games that continue to be my top 3 until this day. It was time to put Sonic on ice for a while. Clearly a series that had passed its best. Unleashed was good, but it wasn't good enough. But of all the Sonic games I played in the 2000s, this is the second best 3D Sonic game behind Adventure 2, being 4th best overall. I say all this, but technically the next Sonic game I actually played wasn't too long after that, the DS version of Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games.
Sonic at the Olympic Games!
Quick fire on this one as I don't have much to say. This was a historic game, as it was the first time in a video game where Mario and Sonic were in the same game. Nowadays it's just kind of expected to happen, but this was a huge deal back when the game originally came out. The DS version is rather downsized compared to its Wii sibling and uses the touchscreen for certain events, but it also uses the buttons where applicable. So in many ways this is less of a gimmick-filled game and more of a proper handheld sports game. 8 characters each from the Mario and Sonic franchises lined up, but suffice to say the soundtrack is quite generic with a lot of themes in that game not particularly memorable. All being said, having re-listened to them for this video recently, I will have to refute that as there are actually some surprisingly good tunes in this game. The Dream events debuted in this game and yeah, that's actually all I have to say about this game. It was pretty much a one long weekend game in many ways, given how long it took to complete, with an almost Mario Kart-like structure to it. It was fun for what it was. Mario and Sonic will continue to star in Olympic Games for years to come, as new installments were released every 2 years, and Sega refined the experience to include more events, more Mario and Sonic characters, actual Mario and Sonic music, and relate the Dream events more to the franchise they were based off of. The Mario and Sonic series currently stands at about 6 games, split across multiple consoles, the most recent ones being based off the Tokyo Olympics, which seems kind of fitting given both Mario and Sonic are of Japanese origin. The funny thing is, that game came out a whole 2 years before the actual Olympics. Yikes! Also, there was just a Sonic at the Olympic Games mobile game released, and also a Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games mobile game. There is also another arcade game we haven't gone across, and that is Sonic Athletics, which was released after the others in 2013 as an Olympic-themed arcade title. By 2010, the Sonic franchise was in something of a state, with repeated negative reactions to games damaging the reputation of the brand. Sega attempted to appease classic fans who felt that the 3D games just weren't as good as the 2D games by releasing Sonic the Hedgehog 4, a game which promised to be a return to form for the franchise, but it wasn't. They screwed over the physics engine so badly in what was a downloadable title split into 2 episodes. Sonic 4's infamous disaster seemed to suggest that there was no going back for Sonic, and around the same time, some weird things started to happen on the internet in regards to Sonic. He had gone from being an icon to being a laughingstock, and seemed permanently stuck there. Mario continued to thrive because Nintendo knew exactly what to do with him. Sonic continued to struggle because Sega didn't know what they should actually be doing with him. Stepping back from the Sonic franchise was looking like a good idea. They then announced Sonic Colors, the next mainline entry in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, with a new alien wisp gimmick, which, when I saw that they were still adding pointless gimmicks that were ruining Sonic games, I passed on too. Donkey Kong Country Returns was coming out, and I was more interested in that. I also had a PS2 and a backlog of games on that console, so Sonic really didn't have any space for me to get the game. The thing is though, the daytime stages of Sonic Unleashed were good, and the reality is that Sonic Colors was an entire game full of them. Kind of. The new Wisp gimmick did not contrast the gameplay, but further enhanced it. Sega had finally done it. They made a great 3D Sonic game, and I looked like a fool for not buying it. They made a game that was in typical Sega fashion, however, when it came to the recent Sonic Colors Ultimate Remaster, they completely messed it up, and the remaster is a glitch fest, which undoes a lot of work the original did in fixing Sonic's reputation. Funny how things work out. I wound up watching the game on YouTube playthroughs now as a Sonic outsider. I maintained an interest in the series, but didn't really want to buy the games anymore. This game had started to change my attitude though. I went from not wanting to buy the games to reserving judgment on them until they came out and deciding whether to buy them, an attitude that I still go with today. I don't want to burn money on a game that's going to be a dud. My reliance now is more on YouTuber reviews rather than press reviews, as they give a better outlet to how things were going. But yeah, the Sonic Renaissance continued with Sonic Generations, a game made to celebrate Sonic's 20th anniversary, going through all the major games as Dr. Eggman harnesses the power of the Time Eater to break time and space apart and undo all of his defeats. Generations is considered to be one of the best modern Sonic games ever made, and probably the best he's ever been in 3D. The 3DS version isn't quite considered to be as good, but it's technically an entirely different game. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing was released and hailed as the best Mario Kart clone in years. Finally, Sonic's ventures into the racing game genre had produced a quality game. It got a sequel in Transformed, which is considered to be an even better game. Sega had somehow made Sonic great again, but as an onlooker, these games completely passed me by. I was getting into a lot of other gaming franchises at the time, and also a lot of these games were also released on the PS3 and Xbox 360, and I didn't own either console at the time. But due to the good reviews that Colors and Generations were getting, I felt that the next major 3D Sonic would be one worth looking into. Then Sonic Lost World was announced. I completely abandoned the boost formula that worked so well to give Sonic's games a new lease of life in favour of what appeared to be a Super Mario Galaxy clone. As a result, I abandoned any plans to get the new Sonic game as I see where this was going. Dang it, Sega, you had something good going on. The fact that it had Zelda DLC makes it annoying to have to miss out on though, dang it! It was around this time that I started volunteering work. While volunteering in a museum of computing, there was a Sega Mega Drive there, and the next game we're going to look at was one of the games on it, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Yeah, this is why I didn't mention Sonic 2 earlier in the video, as I got to play the game while volunteering. I played Sonic 2 multiple times, but could never actually beat it. I could never get past Metropolis Zone in the limited amount of time I had to play, admittedly. Such a difficult level, dang it! Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is an all-time classic, and a major milestone for gaming. The game helped bring the games industry in line with others by introducing a street date, famously called Sonic Tuesday. The game also introduced Sonic's iconic spin dash move. If Sonic 1 was a proof of concept, Sonic 2 took the rough edges and turned it into a mighty fine video game, and one of gaming's greatest classics. Levels like Emerald Hill, Chemical Plant, Aquatic Ruin, okay maybe not that one, Casino Night, Hilltop, Mystic Cave, Oil Ocean and Metropolis are some of the most famous levels in the franchise. Play a game like this at a time where Sonic was starting to decline again just shows the difference. Sega had gotten on top of things, and just as they picked up my interest again, they went and released more duds at a point where I had already seen their good work via YouTube. Lost World turned out to be the precursor for Sonic hitting rock bottom yet again, with the infamous Sonic Boom Rises lyric. For the second time in 8 years, Sonic was in a dud, this time being part of this new spin-off part of Sonic designed to appeal more to the Western market, another one of Sega's baffling decisions. The resulting animated series is one of the greatest Sonic shows ever to be produced, but Rise of Lyric is infamously terrible. Developed by ex-Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter developers, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric was optimised for high-end PCs and then shoved onto the Wii U, resulting in a glitchy mess that gives Sonic 06 a run for its money. Having played neither game, I don't really know whether Sonic 06 or Sonic Boom is the worst game, but Sonic was plunged back into crisis again, just as Sega were getting on top of things. At this point I think it's fair to say that fan frustration was getting to ridiculous levels. Sega just didn't seem to know how to make a good Sonic game anymore. All goodwill and seriousness that the franchise had earned had completely gone away. So how do Sega keep Sonic relevant? The answer? Twitter. The Sonic the Hedgehog Twitter account began to be rather self-deprecating about the franchise it was representing, and Sonic found itself in a weird meta era where the fourth wall was constantly being broken and people were just acknowledging what this franchise had become. Radio silence on the next big Sonic game for consoles kicked into overdrive, though there were two handheld Sonic games released in this era, Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal and Sonic Boom Fire and Ice. But what Sega was doing with Sonic games wasn't really making much of an impact. The fan base were taking things into their own hands and making their own games. Playing fan games helped satisfy a style of game I wasn't really playing much anymore, and was welcome to play again. Made by someone who understood what made these games good in the first place. And also some of the more over the top stuff, but let's not go into that one. After years of not getting a new Sonic game, I finally decided to get one. It was a phone game, Sonic Dash. What? You were expecting something else? Don't worry, we'll get to that one later. Yeah, technically Sonic Dash on mobile was the first Sonic game I owned for years. It didn't last particularly long on my phone admittedly, but it was fun for a bit as an auto-runner that I could waste a bit of time on. The heavy amount of free-to-play microtransactions put me off the game however, and I deleted it to make space on my phone for other things. This was the game I was referring to earlier in the video by the way when I was talking about Secret Rings being an auto-runner of sorts. Because Sonic Dash is an auto-runner for sure. This was one of many Sonic phone games released, the others being Sonic Jump, Sonic Jump Fever, Sonic Dash 2, Sonic Boom, Sonic Forces Speed Battle, Runners, and Runners Adventure. Sonic actually has a deep history of mobile games, showing up as early as 2001 with Sonic Tennis, Sonic Golf, Sonic Fishing, Sonic Billiards, Shadow Shoot, Sonic Hopping, Good Friend Chow, Sonic Racing Shift Up, Sonic Racing Kart, Sonic Racing, Sonic Kart 3DX, Sonic Speed DX, Sonic's Casino Poker, and Sonic Bowling. In addition to this, several classic Sonic games were ported to mobile, or they had their own unique games under the same name as a mainline title made for the mobile phone, like Sonic Unleashed, which was released in 2009. There may be some games I might have missed out. Please let me know in the comments if I have missed out any mobile games, but I think that's all of the ones that were released in some form or another. Okay, let's get back to the fan game topic. Several Sonic fans have been making their own games to recapture what Sega couldn't, making strong, playable Sonic games. Whether these were actual Sonic games that were just released onto the internet, or Sonic-styled games with the characters swapped out for a range of OCs to be sold as an indie game, there are plenty of fan efforts out there trying to recapture what made Sonic good. One of these developers was Christian Whitehead, who had been remaking the classic Mega Drive games, as well as Sonic CD for mobile phones. It was at this time that Sega did something unprecedented. Instead of punishing the fans by taking down the game for infringing copyright, Sega decided to hire the people who made these games. The Sonic Hacking Contest became a yearly thing, which celebrated Sonic fan creations, and Sega earned a tremendous amount of PR off of this, especially given that in 2016 Nintendo received a torrent of backlash for taking down AM2R and Pokemon Uranium. Sega set an example that the internet hoped other companies would follow. Christian Whitehead would go on to remake all the classic Sonic games for mobile officially for Sega, adding features that weren't in the original games. It was clear Sega found someone that understood how to make a good Sonic game. For the Sonic 25th Anniversary stream, which infamously had technical issues, 2 new Sonic games were announced, and it was revealed that Christian Whitehead, Pagoda West Games, and Headcanon would be developing a brand new 2D Sonic game. Forget Sonic the Hedgehog 4, this was going to be the true sequel to the Genesis games. With the fans having shown their understanding of what a good Sonic game was, this new 2D Sonic game was a very unique project, an officially published fan game. This game was, of course, Sonic Mania. Combining what made the original Mega Drive games great with a modern understanding of level design and what works, Sonic Mania is arguably the greatest 2D Sonic game ever made on a pure mechanical level. The development team admittedly reused a lot of zones from the 2D games, and as a result, a lot of fans still consider Sonic 3 and Knuckles to be the best 2D game in the series. But what they did with the gameplay has been great. Sonic has a new drop dash move. Unlike moves in previous Sonic games, this one feels well integrated into the gameplay and actually does a lot to enhance the game. The game's throwback zones tend to reuse level design from Act 1 of the original game, although they are entirely spliced together from their original iterations, before creating a radical shift for the second half and changing things up significantly. Returning from the Mega Drive games are Green Hill Zone, Chemical Plant Zone, Flying Battery Zone, Stardust Speedway Zone, Hydro City Zone, Oil Ocean Zone, Lava Reef Zone, and Metallic Madness Zone. Used to this game are the Studiopolis Zone, the Press Garden Zone, the Mirage Saloon Zone, and the Titanic Monarch Zone. The plot of Sonic Mania involves Dr. Eggman looking for a jewel called the Phantom Ruby. Egg Robos retrieve it from Angel Island and are transformed into the hard-boiled heavies, while also transporting Sonic and Tails to past zones, after both of them arrived on Angel Island, following Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Sonic, Tails and Knuckles traverse these zones in an attempt to stop Eggman. That's it as far as the plot is concerned. Initially, it seemed like this game would just be straightforward, fitting into the timeline of before Sonic Adventure but after Sonic 3 and Knuckles, albeit Sonic continuity is a bit of a mess anyway, but still. However, as we will learn later, this is actually quite different. The whole game is a love letter to classic Sonic, not just from the well-known stuff, but the lesser played games represented here. Knowledge of them certainly helped. I was completely surprised when finishing Chemical Plant Zone Act 2 to suddenly be put into a boss battle which was basically Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. You suddenly have to play an entirely different game in order to beat the level, and it's one of the game's greatest surprises. The game continues to freshen things up. The Sonic CD levels were certainly a new experience for me and felt like new levels, given I never played Sonic CD and barely saw much of it in terms of playthroughs on YouTube. Needless to say, the whole Shrink Sonic part of Metallic Madness surprised me the first time I saw it. It turns out Sonic CD is quite critical to this game. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given Christian Whitehead worked on a Sonic CD remake which got him involved in all of this. Little Planet from Sonic CD was what Eggman was after. He uses the Phantom Ruby to retake control of it. Infiltrating the Titanic Monarch eventually leads Sonic, Tails and Knuckles to defeat the hard-boiled heavies and Eggman and escape just as it explodes. However, if you collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds, there is an additional fight where Sonic and Eggman are transported to a different dimension where the Heavy King betrays Eggman and takes the ruby for himself. This is starting to sound rather familiar. Once again, you have to fight a boss of Super Sonic. The Phantom Ruby ends up negating Sonic's state and creates a wormhole. What happens after that? Well, the next major Sonic game to be released, Sonic Forces, answers that by transporting Sonic Mania Sonic to the 3D dimension. This is why classic Sonic is in the game. After experiments with Lost World and Rise of Lyric, Sonic Forces was an admission that they had to go back to the formula that worked well with Sonic Colors and Generations. So this game was interesting me as one to pick up. However, Sonic Forces was not that. Somehow, Sega managed to make a bad Boost Sonic game. The game is a collective mess and attempting to please every type of Sonic fan, while at the end just not really working out. The Sonic fandom is well known for flooding the internet with original characters, enough to star in about 100 different indie games, so in an ingenious move, Sonic Forces allows you to create your own character. Your character acts as a third playable character alongside classic Sonic and modern Sonic. Dr. Eggman has taken over the world and defeated Sonic. The remaining cast must band together to retake the world from Eggman, and that's basically the premise of the game. Of course, Sonic isn't dead by any means. You would think that this is the best looking 3D Sonic game because it's on the most powerful hardware a Sonic game has ever been on. But while the space vistas are vastly detailed, it somehow falls short graphically with Sonic Unleashed on the Xbox 360 and PS3. How did that happen? The stages are way too short for the type of gameplay it is trying to incorporate. The controls aren't as receptive as Generations and it devolves into complete nonsense pretty quickly. A reminder, Sonic Forces is the game that Sonic Team made. Sonic Mania is the game the fans made.
That's no good.
If ever a year underlined just how much more the fans understood Sonic than Sonic Team themselves, then this was it. Sonic Mania was just one game of an all-star gaming year of 2017. A year where a ridiculous number of classic games were released. Mania slotting in alongside Nier Automata, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Horizon Zero Dawn, Super Mario Odyssey, Splatoon 2, Metroid Samus Returns, Persona 5, Hollow Knight, A Hat in Time, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 as one of the gaming highlights of the year. Sometimes the game industry spoils us. Sometimes. The only Sonic game to have been released since Sonic Forces is Team Sonic Racing, a follow-up to the Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing series with a team-based mechanic, released in 2019. With Mario Kart just repeating its 8th installment on the Switch, and Crash Team Racing being remade for modern consoles, Team Sonic Racing remains one of the few unique kart racing games on the Switch, and certainly the most publicised one. It seems like Sega have realised they need to take their time on Sonic games. Sonic Colors got a remake this year to celebrate the 30th anniversary, and it looks like the next major Sonic game is in development. Whether it will be any good or not remains to be seen. And that was Sonic the Hedgehog, a game series that is among gaming's best-selling franchises, but is also one of its most self-deprecated and one that varies wildly in quality. For every Sonic 2 there is a Sonic 06, for every Sonic Mania there is a Sonic Forces, for every Sonic Generations there is a Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. We can only hope that Sega improves the overall quality of Sonic games going forward. One of the most profitable and mainstream franchises in gaming should not be producing so many low quality bad games. Sonic deserves better. Scrolling now on screen are a list of YouTubers I have sourced footage from for certain games. Most of these games I didn't play or were on handhelds. I have sourced my own footage from home console games where applicable. Sonic's status as a gaming icon has long been cemented, even if the quality of his games hasn't. But that's not to say all Sonic games have been bad. There are plenty of good games in Sonic's back catalogue and plenty of bad games. Sonic is a franchise that you just have to wait and see if the games are going to be any good. For now, that is it for this Gaming Anniversaries video. Next time, we'll be taking a look at Pokemon. So, thank you for watching this video. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Please share this with your friends so we get more people watching the channel. Please subscribe for more gaming and TCG content, and hit that notification bell so that you can be notified when new videos come out. Also follow me on Twitter at GenericAperson, all one word. Thank you for watching. I've been A-Person, goodbye!